Chapter 72. Inside the tunnel of the musty, decrepit, rickety ghost train ride, D3 gripped her friend Sully by the elbow as they tried to keep up with the man in the cobalt suit, whom D3 considered to be clearly insane. She was clinging to Sully's arm because the retired Commodore could hear Mr. Blue better than D3, mistakenly thinking this meant he could accurately follow the Time Lord. Neither of the companions could actually see anything. Not quite yet, as it was almost pitch black in the dwarf-sized mine shaft, although Mr. Blue assured them that their eyes would adjust in several moments. Exactly how long is a moment? D3 inquired. The alien straightened his azure tie in the darkness. Not long afterwards, he realized his overstated physical show of confidence was completely lost on his companions, as they couldn't see it. So he answered for her. Well, give us some focus then. Try to visualize the interior of this place, based on the echoes you hear. How far away you think you are from my voice? Suddenly, it was dimly lit inside. Aha! D3 answered her own question. Not very long, turns out. Mr. Blue grinned, saying, Psychic energy channeled through here. The beacon I spoke of. Before his companions could ask, Now, to find the origin of the signal. As the Time Lord trailed off, his friends took in the tiny waiting area, which was cramped, containing the requisite metal, restraining dividers, complete with a little gate, in front of which stretched a tiny set of tracks. Across these tracks, and opposite the small loading platform on which they stood, were 3 waxwork characters on display. Framing this low-budget and also child-sized haunted house area were blinking red Christmas lights. Feels, old boy, like we're supplying this place's electrical needs. I'm damned exhausted, Sully said. He noted Mr. Blue's sideways glance. Well, obviously, even for me, my hairs are standing on end, he observed. Why, the beacon draws you in, because it depends on your consciousness, awareness for its energy source, Mr. Blue agreed. Wireless power? D3 said. The old Time Lord nodded. Your civilization could perceive it as such, I suppose. D3 crossed her arms, but managed to point a single finger at the waxwork figures. Are those going to burst to life like the ride as well? Because we're here? Sully reassured the nervous young Mercurian woman. All this is fake horror. It's fake effects. Made with rubber, plastic, the likes. D3 peered around and listened to the approaching train. If you say so. Mr. Blue stared across the tracks at the plastic caricatures, composed of a very generic werewolf, beside which stood the classic 1940s film Dracula, also a bit generic itself. Between them lay a torture victim tied to a stretcher. The wee train and the correspondingly wee empty passenger car reminded Sully of his grandchildren's Power Wheels when they screeched up to a halt in front of the time travelers. All aboard! Mr. Blue threw his arms out wide. He tried to whistle. The result was a bit of a drool. Not the corresponding whistle sound one would expect. Sully shook his head. As the attractive young lady adjusted her hair and tied her coat rather tightly, D3 agreed. That is definitely not happening. She pointed again at the train. Nope. No operators, no passengers. As I've pointed out. D3 pointed out again. Yes, thank you. Mr. Blue trailed off and waved the air dismissively as he regarded the mannequins in the distance ever more conspicuously. The train blasted away with too much velocity, causing the empty passenger car to grind and slap against the rickety railing, spewing sparks in its wake. When it passed, Mr. Blue took the opportunity to cross through the tiny metal gate and jump over the tracks. Wouldn't do that. Sully fumbled for a cigarette. Mr. Blue stepped closer to the childish horror show. These decorations are enhancing the signal. I can sense the raw psychic tap emanating, to a degree, from them as well. They're part of it. Why would you say that? D3 asked. That symbol I drew back in our room at the inn? The incomprehensible scribbles on white chalk? The same. The Time Lord reached out a hand and fiddled with the torture victim's manacles. Don't touch them, you moron! D3 became exasperated. What about your stupid-ass scribbling? Ancient I love magic. The retired Commodore couldn't find his smokes, gave up, but then muttered something out loud to appear as if he was keeping up with the conversation. A trick he learned with his wife. You're kidding me! The Time Lord shrugged. Supposedly. It's helping me to hone in on the type of... He fumbled with the hair of the stationary werewolf. You know, this appears quite authentic. Gonna need you to finish that thought right now. D3 snapped her fingers, a trait she'd apparently picked up from the elderly Time Lord in the cobalt suit. He obliged. There's a race of consciousness. Plastic consciousness. D3 heard another miniature mineshaft ghost car grinding closer. Great. Get away from the werewolf. They're called the Nestine, Mr. Blue continued. A hive mind polymorphic alien sentience. D3 could swear she saw Dracula twitch. Tiny train of death, approaching fast now. Don't you hear it? Mr. Blue, who was now ridiculously close to the train tracks, turned around to face her. This is coinciding with a larger event that you're not taking into account. Why don't you explain it to me when you get back here on the safe side? The old Time Lord held up a finger. My guess is that my fears are real. We've crashed here after colliding with the Avatardis, and what was once a small rift in the vortex has now become a full-blown hole of anti-time. Sully asked. Then why does this village look like it's a fishbowl on paws? I say we're just stuck in a rock. A multi-dimensional hole, especially one in, say, space or time, appears like an orb. A sphere. Mr. Blue looked around, taking everything in. From our point of view, we're stuck in a bubble in which temporal mechanics have a quantum effect of 0. Just like alpha rays can't pass through a piece of paper, or X-rays can't penetrate lead. It seems time cannot permeate Sycamore Downs. Down from the standard space-time continuum, and guess who's in the hole? D3 yelled. You gotta get away from the rubber freak show, dude. I think the nesting consciousness was already here, perhaps before that lone derelict arrived in the 1940s. What the hell does that have to do with... Mr. Blue interrupted. If her Avatardis ejected this seat's consciousness here when we crashed, then this seat could have attached herself to the Nestine, lying dormant. Sully had to shout over the imminent mineshaft car arrival. You anchor? Then why the bloody hell are you standing next to the plastic? The torture victim snapped through his restraints, sat up, and grabbed the Time Lord's wrist.